Hi everyone. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to just introduce the project, and then Hope's going to talk a bit about her role in the humanities, like data, some of the, like we're working through this in our draft of a data paper that we're writing, which then after Hope has finished talking about in the center about the humanities data questions we've been thinking about, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we've got and where we find ourselves, and NESCUS and its data paper, fairly newly created data paper section, which is what we're going to be submitting this to by the end of this month. So I'm just trying to get there we go, slideshow. This is probably the last time I'll do this stump speech, so I'm getting a bit nostalgic now because I've done this stump speech about this project about 1,000,000 times, but now I'm doing it in retrospect. This is basically just because to understand the data and what we have to talk about and why we wanted a data paper. I think you have to understand the sort of slightly peculiar nature of the project itself and how it came about. So basically, yeah, as James kindly introduced, it's part of the European Regional Development Fund, the Island Wales Cooperation Programme, which is now ended, and it was one of the last projects of that to finish. It's a partnership between, firstly, it's about the port towns in the Irish Sea Basin and their ferry crossings, their active ferry crossings, about their identities, their links across the Irish Sea, and telling their story through a variety of work packages, stories, heritage films, documentary films, creative commissions, and a bunch of other things that we had to basically find appropriate archives for as data. And often they had different requirements, different needs for different licenses. So basically finding a coherent place to put all of them. The partners were, UCC as the lead, Wexford County Council, University of Wales, Trinity St David, which is in Aberystwyth, and their Llanolfan, the Centre for Advanced Welsh and Celtic Studies, and Aberystwyth University itself, primarily the geography department there. And the routes are Rosslare Harbour, the town, and Rosslare Europort to Fishguard in Pembrokeshire, Rosslare to Pembroke Dock, also in Pembrokeshire, and of course the Dublin to Holyhead route. And 2 countries worth of academics, worth of stakeholders, worth of NGOs and semi-states, etc., councils, Ireland and Wales. And the vision was and is, and hopefully the data dimension, the archiving that we've done will help this to happen, is to create new futures for port towns in the Irish Sea Basin. The project finished about 7 months ago now, and one of the longest sort of tales of the project will be the media artifacts it created. And I'm just introducing the term media artifacts because the reason we chose NESCUS, which is a media studies journal, is because it specializes and has a particular interest in media. The link there, which will be in the slides that I think Aoife will distribute, is to the report, which is was a sort of qualitative assessment of the project that we've put on. Sorry about that, I was just coughing. Right. So this is the little potted executive summary. That the whole idea of the project was cultural heritage and heritage tourism, but not to just be tourism or just be history or cultural heritage, but to merge the two together and to try and reimagine these towns as stopping places you might want to go and visit, and that they have their own unique identities and like a cluster of really interesting things to see, a beautiful environment, or a very interesting environment with a lot of really unexpected things on the doorstep, and an ongoing sort of network which continues through some of the successor projects of Ports Past and Present. So these are just some pictures I took that all come out of archiving and professional photography that we had done, which appears in the archive. Pictures of doing app walks and looking at, that's a sign for a chemist, for an air raid shelter, embedded in a tree in Pembroke Dock on the bottom right where the wood's growing over it. The top one's a nice picture that my colleague Danielle took of me on the deck of the Blue Star, which is the Pembroke Dock to to Rosslare Europort ferry. So that's just a sort of taster, basically. I'm just going to put up the data source list, and then I'm going to hand over to Hope. But that's just there for you to have a look at the basic places that we stored the data and also aggregated the data to, and then I can talk a bit more once Hope's had to talk. So I'll hand over at this point.
James, if you could just mute, yeah, you're muted yourself. Okay, and Hope, you're away. Thank you. Thanks, James. So I worked on the data ingest parts of the Ports Past and Present project as a research assistant. So I came on in the last couple months of the project in 2023. And I joined that project near its completion to assist James with the archiving, storage, and continued accessibility of that project. In my role, I collated and prepared metadata on a diverse data set, which James has mentioned, from the Ports Past and Present website, which is an Omeka website, for ingest and long-term preservation within the Digital Repository of Ireland. The Ports dataset includes a wide variety of forms of data, so photography, multimedia books and chapbooks, video, audio, documentary films, heritage stories, and a complementary Zenodo collection of interoperable project data. As someone near the beginning of their own professional, academic, and research career, my experience in preparing this data set for ingest into the DRI impressed upon me the importance of developing both good data management, which I'd already learned a little bit about from Aoife, from the initial stages of research. And I know this has been heavily emphasized today, but it was really apparent coming onto the project at the very end. And also the unique opportunities that come with preserving humanities data in contrast to other forms of data. In fact, practicing good reflective data management is paramount if digital humanities, and indeed all research projects, must by definition provide for the continued accessibility of the project. We have only to look at the unfortunate case of the digitization of the Doomsday Book. I don't know heard of this, a project which has now become completely unreadable online, to know the importance of sound data management. At the most basic level, Ports Past and Present was a project about human connection, with descriptions of the project highlighting that the Irish Sea Basin, which was the focal point of the project, forms a distinct node of histories, economies, and identities, and emphasizing that project goals included promoting tourism and deepening a sense of shared identity among the port communities participating in the project. Stakeholders, members of the research team, and other participants in Ports Past and Present came from a wide variety of sectors and backgrounds, including tourism, academia, and cultural heritage, which James has mentioned. The incorporation of a critical and practical humanities lens into the project fostered constructive discourse between these diverse groups involved in Ports Past and Present, and kept this underlying idea of the importance of human connection and discussion center stage. Because of this humanities lens that was present in the development and the goals of the project, the data output from Ports Past and Present is a form of humanities data. Humanities data may not come always in the form of numerical data sets. It might sometimes, but it's not a generalization, shall we say, that we can make. But the preservation of humanities data offers a unique framework for building bridges and fostering discussion between academic institutions and the general population and wider communities. And these were both key stakeholders in Ports Past and Present. The reuse potential of humanities and social sciences oriented data, like that of Ports Past and Present, is significant, although I believe that it requires a different perspective on data reuse than might be applied to data generated in the sciences. Some general questions prove useful in establishing the reuse potential of humanities data. What communities and purposes were the research outputs designed to serve? How might the research team expand access to these data outputs, and what is the value of such expansion? Will the preservation of these data sets spur any conversation or discourse between the communities in question in the future? A combination of a variety of forms of data and the preservation of these data sets within several different archives ensure that the port's past and present data will remain stable and secure, interoperable, open, and accessible to a wide variety of audiences, both within and outside the academic and research community. Thus, Port's Past and Present's project goal of fostering a variety of forms of interpersonal human connection through the growth of tourism industries in port communities, through cultural exchange, and significantly through discussions between members of the Academy and the general public, extends beyond the scope and timeline of the project. And I'll hand it over to James now.
Thanks, Hope. Yeah, so basically the remaining section is just for me to show a few screenshots of some of the places that you saw on the previous links, and to just talk a little bit about why we've picked the, because we've heard about the different affordances of different data paper journals, why they've come into existence, the sort of subcategories of them, and it sort of bears to why we basically picked a sort of more specialist journal option in this case. So it's worth talking about why we did that. So I mean, like one thing that we did is we put a lot of the project specific data, the things that we heard about the different capturing the different stages of the research life cycle. We did that with Zenodo with anything that we didn't consider to be explicitly cultural heritage data. So if it wasn't like an audio clip, a video, a piece of art, something that was like a media item specifically, we put it in Zenodo, and that includes things like a list of all of the snapshots, like a full WACZ, like walk record, a full crawl of the website and all the stories. We use PermaCC to snapshot each of the over 280 stories, and they can all be viewed as they appeared at the time of snapshotting. So we kept the kind of user experience, like so that people could see what we were doing and what we were aiming for. We also kept things like our project, our data management plan. Actually, Deborah Thorpe, who was the data steward on the project, but now is working for DONS in the Netherlands, who was also our sort of co-writer of this paper. We've been working on an updated version of the data management plan just to make sure the final version is like easier to read. Things like that, risk registers, basically things that we thought. Well, the thing I said to our project manager is, can you imagine that when you started your job, you would have found reading this document useful? And there were quite a few things, the project's report, end of project report. That's all the useful, quote unquote, useful information, essentially. We also put in like READMEs for some of that. I made README documents for our crawl and our stories, and certain sections had READMEs where it was, would assist in capturing the context in which they were captured. Also because Zenodo is great with like spreadsheets, it's very, very easy to just click on any one of the archived web pages without even opening the file. So it's just a very easy sort of hand list of all the stories. Another thing to point out is we also aggregated to two very important places. The one on the left is Europeana. All the cultural heritage data went to Europeana, videos, audio. If you now you search for any of these towns on Europeana, we've completely stacked the results. So you get a lot of historical images, but there's loads more material. We've changed the sort of profile of these towns when you search for them in Europe's sort of cultural patrimony, for want of a better word. Also, the People's Collection of Wales, which is on the right, which is very, very popular with, it's like local historians, it's crowdsourced. My colleague Rita uploaded it, like reproduced a lot of our stuff. And as you can see by some of the read rates on there, it's been a really engaged way of people continuing to read the material. So it's exactly the same as what we put on, say, the Digital Repository of Ireland. But a lot of people are finding, and so for Wales, it's been a really good web place to aggregate. The Digital Repository of Ireland also holds all the artworks, the photography, the images of the creative commissions. You can have a look at all that by clicking on the links in here, but there's like over 1,000 items, so it's a little hard to summarize them. But that includes all the work of a lot of born digital creative work, things that didn't exist in other formats, things that had to have some way. And just to wrap up, the paper, the journal that we've gone for is called Nescus, and we've published a summary of some of our media in there before, but it's the Journal of NECS, the European Network for Cinema and Media Studies, and they've very recently created a new section for data papers because it comes within their remit, and it's there's only about a dozen of them so far, less perhaps even, but it's a subject matter media specialist perspective and we thought that was the best place to go, rather than seeing it as data, as in like abstracted, that could be reused for. We basically based it on the assumption that it would be seen as media to be used or consumed or used in other promotional activities. We tried to make it so that people would come meet it where they were, if that makes sense. And it's a Diamond OA journal, and it deposits all of its work in a media rep, which is a media studies repository that's funded partially by the German government and also some German universities, which is a very good repository by my standards. It's very, very easy. They have a good policy. It's robust. It's quite easy to use, easy to find things. It has, mint DOIs, etc. So they have permanent archiving built into the process, and they've thought about that right from the beginning. The way that their articles are a bit more discursive, and they have fewer headings than, say, Jode, and they're a bit more narrative in nature. I'll just show you the most recent one they did, which is about, like public lectures in the Netherlands, and it's a lot more discursive in the way it's got fewer categories and it's more discursive, but it still covers the same bases that any data paper journal has to cover, of like who, where, what, why, what are the relevant DOIs, what's the method. But it's a bit more like a traditional academic article, although fairly short. With that, I think I'll draw to a close, but essentially, it's a bit of a internally diverse collection, has a lot of potential readers, a lot of potential purposes, and we wanted to pick a data paper journal that would reflect that when we publish it, which we should be submitting it towards the end of this month, and it should be out in the next issue. So with that, I'll say thanks for listening.